Welcome to the Restricted Handling Daily Intel Brief. This is what's been going on in Iran and the Middle East in the past 24 hours. Iran has stepped up its effort to control how vessels move through the Strait of Hormuz. The pattern now is more structured than earlier phases of disruption. Iranian Revolutionary Guard naval units are issuing formal routing instructions, warning ships that they must coordinate through Iranian channels and follow designated traffic schemes. Anything outside those lanes is being described as unsafe and not protected under Iranian guarantees. That language matters. It is not just a warning. It is a way of asserting administrative authority over international movement without formally declaring ownership of the waterway. Then the situation escalated again near Oman, where a commercial vessel transiting through a recommended international route was struck. The ship sustained damage to its bridge area, but there were no casualties, and it continued under its own power. What is more important than the physical damage is what happened immediately after. The United Nations Maritime Evacuation Initiative, which had been trying to move stranded vessels out of the Gulf using coordinated safe corridors, has now been paused. That decision followed the strike and reflects a simple reality. Once safety guarantees are questioned, even temporary traffic solutions become unusable. So the system that was trying to restore movement is now frozen. And that leads directly into the diplomatic response, which was unusually direct. The U.S. and Gulf Cooperation Council issued a joint position rejecting any attempt to impose tolls, fees, or controlled transit systems in the Strait of Hormuz. The language was deliberate. It was aimed at shutting down the idea that shipping lanes could become a revenue-generating or permission-based system managed by a regional actor. Iran's counterposition is equally clear. Tehran is arguing that safe passage cannot exist without Iranian coordination, and it has begun framing unauthorized routes as lacking protection. In parallel, Iranian-linked maritime authorities are warning that vessels outside approved corridors will not be covered by safety guarantees or liability frameworks. So what you're really seeing here is a clash over governance models. One side is pushing open access under international coordination. The other is pushing controlled access under coastal state authority. And neither side is backing off. Now zoom out into the economic layer, because markets are reacting in a way that shows how uncertain this really is. Even after the vessel strike, oil prices actually eased. That might sound counterintuitive, but it reflects something important. Traders are currently weighting the partial recovery of shipping flows more heavily than isolated disruptions. In other words, the market is not yet pricing a full closure scenario. At the same time, Saudi Arabia has restarted crude loadings at a major Gulf export terminal after a long operational pause during the conflict period. That restart signals something subtle but important. Major producers are preparing for normalization of export flows even while security conditions remain unstable. So you've got this split environment where ships are moving again, but nobody is fully confident in the rules governing their movement. And that uncertainty is where the geopolitical pressure sits. Now shift to the U.S. position, because there is a deeper structural reassessment happening that goes beyond immediate crisis management. During the earlier phase of the conflict, Iranian missile and drone activity demonstrated reach into multiple U.S.-linked facilities across the region, including the Naval Command Hub in Bahrain. Reports indicate damage to command infrastructure and communications systems, even if operational continuity was maintained. That distinction matters less in Washington than the underlying signal. The assumption that Gulf basing was insulated from sustained precision strike capability is no longer valid. As a result, internal planning discussions are now exploring a more distributed posture. That includes potential relocation of certain command functions, greater hardening of infrastructure, and shifting sensitive capabilities further away from exposed coastal nodes. This is not a rapid shift. It is a slow architectural rethink of how U.S. presence in the Middle East is structured. Now layer in diplomacy, because the political framework sitting on top of all of this is still the 60-day U.S.-Iran understanding. That agreement is supposed to stabilize maritime movement, open space for nuclear discussions, and reduce escalation risk. but it is already being stress tested in real time. One of the key pressure points is verification. The International Atomic Energy Agency is insisting that inspectors must be granted access under the interim framework. Iran has pushed back, signaling that certain sites may remain restricted until a final agreement is reached. That gap between political commitment and physical inspection is where nuclear uncertainty lives. Because without inspectors on the ground, you are relying on declared intent rather than verified status. And the baseline risk is not theoretical. Iran's enriched uranium stockpile prior to the conflict was assessed at a level that significantly shortens the timeline to weapons capability if further enrichment occurs. That is why inspection access is not just procedural. It is central to the entire agreement holding together. Now bring in the regional military layer, but keep it tied to strategy rather than battlefield detail. In Lebanon, Israeli forces and Hezbollah-linked units remain in a sustained confrontation inside southern zones. The key issue is not just ongoing strikes, but the political framework trying to manage them. There are proposals on the table for phased pilot zones, where Lebanese forces would gradually assume control of areas currently under Israeli military presence. But the sequencing problem has not been solved. Israel is conditioning withdrawal on Hezbollah disarmament. Lebanese actors are pushing for territorial transition first, and Hezbollah is rejecting the structure altogether. So instead of a single negotiated pathway, you've got three competing timelines operating at once. That mismatch is what keeps the system unstable even when the intensity of fighting fluctuates. Now there is another layer that quietly reinforces the broader picture: cyber and intelligence activity. Authorities in Europe, working with US law enforcement, have arrested an Iranian-linked individual accused of long-running cyber operations targeting US institutions, including universities and infrastructure networks. The alleged activity spans years and includes significant financial damage. What matters here is not just the arrest, but the continuity of method. Iran is operating across multiple domains at once: maritime pressure, proxy conflict, nuclear negotiation leverage, cyber intrusion, and diplomatic signaling. None of these are separate tracks. They reinforce each other. That's the operational model. And when you put everything together, the picture becomes clearer. The Strait of Hormuz is now a governance contest under pressure. Iran is testing how far it can push de facto control without triggering a unified enforcement response. The US and Gulf states are trying to preserve open navigation without escalating into a wider conflict. Markets are trying to price risk without overreacting. And international organizations are getting pulled into the middle as arbiters of shipping legitimacy. At the same time, nuclear verification is unresolved. Lebanon remains active as a secondary pressure front, and US force posture is being quietly redesigned in response to demonstrated vulnerabilities. Thanks for listening and helping build this community. If you'd like to support the show, leaving a comment or sharing the episode helps more people find it. And if you want to continue the conversation, we publish a daily intel brief on Substack at restrictedhandling.substack.com with deeper analysis on Russia, China, Iran, the Middle East, and the DPRK. Have a great weekend. We'll see you next time.